Okay, so that looks good. All right, and then let's see.
All right, we're good to go. We're live on Twitch too.
All right, cool.
All right, Dan, I'm going to count you down whenever you're ready.
Sounds good. Right, anytime now.
All right, Dan was born ready. I know that. All right, here we go. Counting you down. 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to episode number 17 of The Gray Stage, the book by Greg Fernandez, Jr. This is the 17th episode. Today we'll be covering Chapter 9 of the book. Chapter 9 of the book is called Suspicious Activity. And we'll be covering, if you're following along at home in the book, pages 74, 75 through 77. And with us today is Greg Fernandez, Jr., William Rail, Stephen Sanziri, Catherine, Michelle, and myself. Welcome, everybody.
Thanks, Dan.
Hey, how you doing, guys?
Thank you.
Well, we've got an interesting chapter today on today's episode. We also have some good images and graphics to go along with this podcast for today. And this is, once again, every chapter of Greg's book, I think, is important. We can't discount any of the chapters. All of them are good, and all of them have great detail, and they present only facts. But this chapter should be interesting. Suspicious Activity. This is one of my favorites. Should we start off, Greg?
Yeah, please do.
All right. So let's start, and then we'll go through a couple of paragraphs here, then get everyone's input. I'll start off by reading. Detective Brian Bone spoke with, quote, friend of the family, unquote, Chris Klien at 5 p.m. on February 17th, 2015. He says, I had been trying to locate Klien, Detective Bone wrote in supplemental report, quote, to learn why he had been at the Crowley residence on 1/19/15, as a neighbor had called in about a suspicious person in the house, unquote. During the call, Klien asked the detective about the status of the investigation and speculated, quote, about how many rounds had been discharged at the house, unquote. He indicated to me, Detective Bone continued, that he had been in the house since the discovery of the Crowley family at the residence. He had said he had been in there with David's father and brother, had been there with and seen there were 2 shot rounds on the floor and roof. Prior to this conversation, I was not aware of a round being shot into the ceiling/roof, end quote. I'll end there. There's lots of information there. What I'll just start off for the listeners, Greg, is to say that the bodies were discovered in January, on the 17th of January, 2015, of the 3 bodies of the Crowley family members. This whole section here takes place on February 17th, 2015. So we've got to keep in mind that a whole month had passed before this conversation even took place. And the quote that's most alarming is Detective Bone saying that I was not aware of a round being shot into the ceiling/roof. This is 1 month later, and this is the detective on the case. What are your thoughts to start off with? I'm going to start with William, maybe, or Catherine?
What would
sure.
you like? Go, William.
Yeah, William.
Oh, no. Ladies first.
Let's go, Catherine. Let's see what your thoughts are here on this whole Chris Klien episode.
Oh, this is one of my, it's like one of those things that just really frustrates you, because this tells me so much. I mean, we know that Chris Klien is not telling the truth. So why is he not telling the truth? And the other point of contention for me is where Bone is stating he wasn't aware of a hole in the ceiling, and yet to this day they're trying to tell us they knew there was a hole in the ceiling. Mm-hmm. Well, no, your report clearly tells us no, so why are you telling us yes now? And who is this Chris Klien? Why was he there? And then why was he not able to be found for an entire month?
How about you, William?
So, I mean, a lot of the same points I'm definitely seeing as well. We know that he, just to touch on what Catherine said about the lie, we know that if we'll get to it later, I'm sure, but we know that he directly lied about who was there with him. Dan Jr. seems to be the only one that actually does kind of fit in with this, because we see a couple of people actually talking about Dan Jr. being there, but we know Dan Sr. was not there. And that struck a chord with me, but also the fact that, how could they not tell there was a bullet hole in the ceiling? They're saying David shot himself in the head. Where is the bullet? Well, you'd figure they'd look around. Are there bullet holes? And they didn't see the one in the ceiling? That just strikes me as odd.
And I think just to add, this is Dan again, just to add as far as an investigation, that would be the most important bullet at the scene, would be that suicide kill shot. The other ones are important from for the investigation, but you need to have that final gunshot bullet fragment from the suicide. They never had it for a month, didn't even know there was a hole in the ceiling, which many people believe that there wasn't, which is more than likely, I believe, the truth, that there wasn't at the time. But they've gone a full month, and this is the first time it even raises the antenna of the investigators. And Chris Klien, as major he is in this case, this was the very first time investigators spoke with him on the record. There's no visits to his house, no phone calls until a month later.
Yeah.
And I'm not laughing because it's funny. This is a what I would call a triple homicide case, biggest case in the city of Apple Valley for decades. And this is the first time they talked to him is one full month later. And this isn't even a joke. This is the facts.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that,
Stephen,
from a law enforcement background?
There was one other thing I wanted to add real quick, just to touch on. So the other thing is he also was talking about how many shots were fired. Why was he curious about that? That's the question I have. Is it sticking out?
That's a very good question. I think Stephen can answer that too, because when people are starting to question, on a normal phone call like this, starting to get what I would call chatty with the detectives. Hey, what do you think? They're inquiring. How many shots were fired? That's a very good question. Why did he have to ask that question at all? Why would anyone, questioned by police, start turning around and start to question them?
People that say too much, usually you got to look toward the meter goes toward the guilt side a little bit, and it varies with different people and even nationalities. They taught us in the academy. But with Americans, just like us, everything else, like we spoke about earlier, the loudest one in the room is the weakest one in the room. And if it's very quiet, they'll come out and they'll start asking questions or what have you. And then that leads to, you want to, if this guy's chatty, you want to talk to him.
Greg, any follow-up on that?
Yeah, I got a few things there. Yeah, I think that's definitely it. He definitely was chatty, because if you read Detective Brian Bone's report, that's what it basically sounds like. It's like it doesn't sound like Brian Bone was asking him questions. It sounded like Chris Klien started asking Detective Bone questions.
That's what happens. Yeah. Yeah. That I've seen it be. It usually it's like a 90% meter, guys. If they're like that, it's just there's some guilt.
It also kind of seems like Klien didn't know, that the police didn't know that there was a bullet hole in that ceiling. Because he's just saying, hey, we found, we saw these shot rounds in the floor and in the roof. So at this point, we don't know if Klien did or didn't know that the police even knew about this bullet hole, right? There's a few other things here. Obviously, the big one, which is really dumb, but it was the big one that really, I spent a lot of time in my book trying to figure this out. Maybe, Stephen, maybe you can help me with this. In two reports, they spell Chris Klien's name three different spellings. So in my book, I ran with the spelling Klien. I'm not sure if that's the right one. How does Detective Brian Bone, when he's listing the person's name, his number, his address, date of birth, his age, blah, 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 it's Klein. my first thought was, okay, well then that should be the one that I should put.
Right.
That's what I should put in the book. But in his statement, every time that he talks about Klien, it's Klien. So I just said, okay, you know what? Okay, I'm just going to put Klien. Not that big of a deal for some people. It looks like this.
Oh, hey. Well, first of all, I before E after C and all that kind of stuff, right? Well, it's German, and well, I can tell you this: the case I'm working right now, the murder case, the first contact after the man was attacked by the dog, air ambulance wrote his name is Brandon Katsaros. His name is Daniel Katsaros. Brandon is not even close to Daniel. I'll tell you right now, part of it, I'll tell you, is part of the generation is in police reports and such. If you make a mistake or date in court, you lose a case and this and that. A lot of it's poor penmanship, guys, and not paying attention. And I would attribute it to that in lieu of them hiding something.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure. I mean, but
that's what I'll say. Yeah.
Should we go with the Klien because that's what's in the statement and that's in here 3, 4, 5 times, or is it Klein? Now the other report, Detective Sean.
Go with the death certificate.
Go with the death certificate. Well, we don't.
No, I'm just kidding. No, I shouldn't have said that. But anyway, I'm jumping ahead. I take that back.
The birth certificate. There you go.
Oh, well, okay, I can go with that. No, I mean something official with him is if you can find something with him, yeah.
Right.
But anyway, the point is we know who he is.
Yeah, and again, it's like I spent a lot of time on that, which is not a big deal. It's not, may not even be relevant to this case. It just kind of showed how quickly all of this happened, that they had to get all of this out. This is all newfound stuff for them at this point. The case is I don't know if you would qualify it as being reopened, re-examined, et cetera, What are the levels of that? It is interesting that it took them 1 month to finally follow up. I had spoken with Catherine, and she was right that it was actually now the cops left a card. So Detective Bone left his business card for Chris Klien, but Chris Klien was the one who did call them. They did not call him. So just
right.
To know that.
That's important, Greg. That's a very important. I mean, who calls the police? Nobody wants to talk to the police.
Well, if they tell him, right, they left he left his card. Yeah, I mean that could be more proof of he's just a talker. They left a business card, so obviously he wasn't there when the police showed up at Klien's house. And it's not really clear, when did they leave the business card as opposed to when Klien called them. Was it the
called
same
back,
day?
right?
Was it the next week? We can all, we
exactly.
can only say it was sometime between January 19th and February 17th of 2015. That's what we know for sure.
There you go.
So when they did that, the other thing that I had a question was this the only 911 call that is tied with this case as of January 19th? Because there's no other record of any other call of anything like that, and we know that there were people in the house, friends and family of David and Kamel were in that house after January 19th. So no other neighbor. The neighbor called, the police called on January 19th, didn't call any time after that, and that made me wonder if there was some connection with the neighbor who called. And the neighbor was told, hey, there's going to be people there. You don't have to worry about calling back. Don't worry about a quote-unquote suspicious person as of January 19th because there will be other people there.
Sure.
But this must have been, suspicious in nature enough to warrant that phone call. This neighbor, I think, who lives two or three houses down, it's not an immediate neighbor, but there's enough commotion going on there that he or she called, and this was a 911 phone call. It doesn't say it here in the report, but when I submitted for the report FOIA request for this phone call, it came up as a 911 call through dispatch on the 19th. So someone made a 911 fairly urgent call, I would suspect, at the location of a triple homicide where bodies were discovered 2 days before. This is a pretty major event, I would think, enough so that he or she didn't even leave their name.
Right.
But we hadn't gotten to that point, I don't think, yet. But it's very interesting, yes.
I'm a little curious as to why they didn't leave their name.
I don't know. I don't think any of us know the answer to that, but yeah.
Did the police ask? Did they ask for the neighbor's name? I don't even think that's in the report, right?
No.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
You
not
know what,
framed.
guys? The chances are police dispatch has the phone number that came in. They're just not disclosing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
They know who's calling. Yeah.
They gave us 94 pages and put everybody's phone number in there. I took the phone numbers out. You know, it took me a little while.
Yeah.
I didn't have the software that maybe William has to take them out in files. I had to literally go through page by page to take every person's phone number out. So, anyways.
Wow.
All right, unless there's anything else, we can move on to the next page.
All right, on the this is on the top of page 75 in the book. It says, the following day, February 18th, Detective Bone relayed the new information to Detective Sean McKnight. He says, quote, I contacted Daniel Theodore Crowley, Detective McKnight wrote in his report, the father of David Crowley. To our knowledge, he is the next of kin in this case. He told me that he was not aware of the bullet hole and had not go into the house with Klien. I asked for permission from Dan Sr. to enter the home to verify that there is a bullet hole. He agreed to let us in and provided us with the lockbox code, end quote. Should we stop there or continue on?
Yeah, let's stop there. Get everybody
started. Okay. So we know, also started off here, we know that Chris Klien said to police in his direct words that I was in the house with David's brother and his father. So they make a call to the father just to follow up. You know, they're vetting the conversation, following up. Were you in the house with this character called Chris Klien? And the father says, no, I wasn't. Well, this should already have the antenna of the detectives, antenna raised by this. And then they go on to say that he's the next of kin, which I think at this point was the father and his mother, David Crowley's mother, Kate, I think would also be next of kin, right? Is that correct? I'm surprised they say just the father here, but his parents were divorced, both at this time, both still alive. Wouldn't both be the next of kin, or did they come to any conclusion there with the father? And then they just asked for permission to enter the house, and he says, yes, go in and take a check it out. Here's the code. He lives in a town called Owatonna, which is about a 45-minute drive away from Apple Valley. So that would make sense that he just said, go on in there yourself and check it out. I'm not going to drive up there just to look. But here's the key code. Go on in for the combination. And so that was very interesting. Once again, this is a month later. The memorials, the cremations, everything had already been done. And they're still getting these odd conversations from strange characters in this, or strange actors, I should say, in this case. Anyone else?
I mean, I think everything was already pretty much touched on, but yeah, I think you definitely make some really good points here. That it's a month later. Why didn't they find all this stuff prior? It doesn't make any sense. And I'm still curious as to why this didn't raise the attention of any of the detectives on this. Well, maybe we should look into this guy further. Maybe we should be looking at some of these other actors here a little bit more closely. It's kind of bothers me.
Do you think, and this is a question directed for Stephen Sanziri as someone formerly in law enforcement, is do they have the audio of this conversation where they called the father? And is that something that we could, as a FOIA request to get the audio of how this conversation went? I'm willing to bet the father, Daniel Crowley, David's father, probably says, wait, who's Chris Klien? And why would he say I was in the house? Who's this guy? Or did he say, oh yeah, I know him. I wasn't in the house with him, but I know him. I'd like to know what his response would be. Is that something that's possible, Stephen?
Yeah, I think it is. All conversations in the police departments, and I can't tell you everywhere and to which years they arranged it and adapted that anybody who called in or anything else was recorded. And now there'll be something where, they'll let you know that. But I think there was a time when Title 14 wasn't involved in that. In case somebody like dialed the wrong number of 911 or something, and there was an emergency, they could at least record it and rehear it, what have you. So that came around with that. But I'm not sure. I can't answer that exactly if you can obtain it, or if there is even a recording of that. I really don't know.
Right, because this would be the police calling David's father, right?
Yeah. So it'd be the other way around. You know what? They'd have to let them know, but I don't know if they would record it. I really don't know, Greg.
And I would think one way to get about that, work around that, would be to submit the FOIA, and if they write back and say this doesn't exist, then we have our answer that they weren't recording. Or if they say it does exist, but you don't have rights to it or something, or it's long since been deleted, we'll still have the answer as far as that too. But I would think all these things would be recorded.
Yeah, I know 911's recorded because we've subpoenaed those all day, but I don't know if I ever subpoenaed anything that was a normal. But that the PD called them, yeah, probably they'd recorded it. I would maybe that I wouldn't.
And just piggybacking off of that, I'd be very interested in that Chris Klien conversation with Detective Bone to see how that went. Mm-hmm. That would for sure be on record, would it not?
Yeah, I mean, but just like the Yosemite case, when they interviewed one of the main suspects, they forgot to turn on the camera. So, I don't know. There should be something there. Yeah, you should. It's going to be recorded, and they talk or they don't talk. And yeah, nobody sits down without recording something. There's no way, because it's hearsay from there. It's your word against his. I mean, video or audio, but video is best with audio. Yeah, this isn't Stone Age. Yeah, they should have that.
And at this point in time, it's just quickly, at the beginning of this case, this case did not draw that much attention the first 3 or 4 days into this case on social media because of the justice pages. It started to pick up, but we had 25, maybe 30 members on the page. But now a month later, by this time on February 16th, this was drawing considerable attention nationwide and everything else. And, Judy Prochnow had since entered the fray on our page, effective February 14th. She started posting. So this was 17th and 18th of February when they knew that, hey, this is drawing a lot of backlash, this entire case. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would suspect something as minor as, I forgot to turn on the recorder probably wouldn't have happened back then, but they would have had their senses heightened, I think, or, by doing everything, taking every precaution they could by this point, unless you said, like before, if there was a cover-up, then we would know that.
Dan, there's a cover-up because when I was doing the Yosemite case in 1999, and it's in the papers, as that Stanislaus County investigators forgot to turn the recording camera on with Eugene Dykes, who was the number 1 or 2 suspect originally. I mean, so yeah, it can happen 15 years later. Yeah. This case is FUBAR,
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay, interesting.
We're just trying to prove it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's it. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, I've got a few points here, or a few things. Now that you bring it up, now I'm wondering why they would call David or Dan Crowley Sr. the next of kin when obviously, his mother is there too. So how did they decide that? Is it always the father? Is that just the general way of how that process goes? Going back and forth of, obviously we know either Chris Klien is telling the truth or Dan Crowley Sr. is. I believe it's impossible for both of them to be telling the truth about who, if Dan Sr. was there. That's the real question. 2 questions. Was Dan Sr. there in the house, and did Dan Sr. see that bullet hole? If Klien was in the house on January 19th, which he said that he was, and he said that he was with Dan Crowley Sr., Klien also says that Klien saw the bullet hole. If Dan Crowley Sr. was there in the house with Klien, I think he would have seen that bullet hole too. And this is why I tend to believe Dan Crowley Sr. over Chris Klien. Just looking at the documents, the very little documentation that we do have here is because Dan Sr. wasn't in the house, and he didn't know about this. It's like a parallel world here. Klien is in one world, Dan Sr. is in another world, and it's just like, it's pretty fascinating. But the fact is, only one of them can be right. The police don't follow.
Right. Who has the motivation of lying? Not the father. Father didn't have nothing to do with his son's death. So the other guy's lying. That's it. You know, the other thing too, guys, is have someone in your house take a pencil and just draw a little, 5/8 circle in the ceiling with a pencil. Walk in and just look around. I bet you'll catch your eye. The bullet hole that was noticeable. It was done afterwards or whatever. Yeah, it's noticeable. You look, see 8-foot ceiling, look up, you'll notice that's the lights on. Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah,
so,
because, I'm sorry to interrupt, because Detective Bones specifically states that it was a quote-unquote obvious defect as soon as he opened the door. So if it's obvious on that day, it's going to be obvious if it were there to begin with.
Yeah, just look. I'm just walking around the house now, just kind of looking at the cabinets, and I would have noticed that in just a second. Yeah, you're right, Catherine.
And then wouldn't it be, I mean, I can understand why the police don't go back to Klien to get a full statement right then when he was there, but at some point later on, wouldn't they want to get a full statement from Chris Klien about what he was doing in the house, what he saw, et cetera, et cetera? Shouldn't there be some type of statement as part of these police reports? Because it's not here.
Well, we don't even know if they did a follow-up with Klien at all. Right. We already know that he was probably more likely lying and the story didn't match up, so there must have been a follow-up by detectives, but I don't see evidence to support that there was any follow-up at all.
Gummert said that they did not follow up with either or about who was in the house, who was not in the house. So that's there.
Well, my question is why would he say that he was there with the father and the son? I mean, especially, I know we're getting into it later, and I don't want to go and spoil too much, but we're definitely going to be seeing some contradictory statements later. But it's on top of that, we also know that that day on the 19th, I think it was Detective Bone and McKnight also went up to Owatonna to go and actually sit down with Dan Sr., Dan Jr., and Allison to discuss the timeline. And the thing is that I found really odd is we don't have the exact time when they, or even kind of a general kind of, it was around this time or anything. We don't have that for the time that they went to go and check out the hole. We don't have the time when they contacted Chris Klien. We don't have the time when, actually maybe we do for Chris Klien on the contact, but I know we don't have the exact time, because I went over this multiple times this morning. I couldn't find a time where they actually said, oh yeah, we sat down with the Crowley family at this time. They didn't even say, there was no time at all. I find that a little odd. I mean, they're pretty consistent with having a time frame, or at least kind of it's around this time, throughout the rest of the case. But these two areas are completely just nothing. We just did it this day. That was it.
Oh, okay. So they just say the day. That's basically it. Because I think they meet with David's mom later that same day.
Exactly.
It's kind of interesting. I know it's way off topic, but both of the parents that they meet with, they don't meet with them separately. It's always with one or two of their kids.
Yeah.
Well, and there are times. I'm sorry, Dan. Go ahead.
I'll just do a quick one. It relates to you, Catherine, your statement. The detective, after they got almost, people started assuming that they didn't do their job by not noticing the defect in the ceiling. When quoted, the detective said later there was an obvious defect in the ceiling. And I think from a police or law enforcement person, it's not likely to be using adjectives like that when asked a question. They would just say, yes, we saw the defect. We saw or we witnessed the hole in the ceiling. He goes out of his way to use the word obvious as a way to prove that they did not do anything wrong the first time they were there. They were drawing considerable some flack for possibly missing the hole the first time they were there. So that's, I think, why he went out of his way to use the word obvious, while at the same time it backfires and puts Gummert in a strange position, because now they're basically saying that they didn't notice it the first time. So I think that's why he used the word obvious, which I don't think the rest of the police department there liked, because now it put them in a position to say, how do you obviously miss it the first time? That's why they had to come back and say, no, we didn't miss it. We saw it both times. And that's where Greg got them all cornered by saying, then show us the evidence of the photo that you took on January 17th, and they couldn't provide it. So I think the answer, number one, by whoever said the ceiling defect was there with using the word obvious, backed them all into a corner, painted them into the corner, and then Greg Fernandez, I believe, did a great job on just saying, well, then provide us with a photo that shows that you did see it there on January 17th, the day that bodies were discovered, and they have yet to do that 6 years later. So that's a key important part. But I think he exposed himself by saying the word obvious, because he didn't want to look bad for, obviously missing it the first time. But what we have proven since this in the past 6 years is that there was no hole there the first day. The hole was added later. So now we've got people altering a crime scene. Go ahead, Catherine, sorry.
No, that's fine. And kind of what, let's see, oh my gosh, so many things going through my head. But how I'll jump to this point that you made first, is that I see him using the terminology not so much as I'm going to cover my butt. I see it as he's writing a report, because if I remember correctly, in the initial reports written, Bone is the one who's extremely detailed in all of his writing. I mean, you look at his statement and then you compare it to the others. I mean, his is, it's like, wow, a dream come true. This. I mean, he was like right on the money, but never once mentioned a hole in the ceiling. So now I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Oh, no. Well, I'm sorry. When he wrote the word obvious, it's obvious upon what is new, not obvious upon what was before. So if we looked up there, we would say it's obvious too. That's his opinion at that time. So that puts it into that obviously happened afterwards. If it's obvious, he's saying it's obvious. Yeah, if I walked in, it's obvious. A month before, it wasn't. So that there just puts it right in that position, Catherine.
Exactly, and that's where I was getting to, is that when he states that in his next report, that to me is he's saying, well, obviously we didn't catch it the first time, but here it is, and it's right there in plain sight. And so, but also at the same time, I really don't think that they thought the likes of Dan Hennon and Greg Fernandez Jr. were going to grab hold of this case and just tear it apart and blow it wide open.
Oh, sure.
So if they had even remotely thought that, I kind of wonder what the reports would look like to begin with. I think they would be different.
Absolutely.
But here was my other thought. So it just came back to me. Sorry. But do we know when the cleaning crew finished with the house?
24th.
Was that on the 24th?
Yep.
Okay. So, because I was wondering why Klien had mentioned the hole in the floor and the ceiling, and then why the hole in the floor was never followed up on. But if they didn't finish till the 24th, now that makes sense.
Catherine, let me ask you something.
Yes.
We know the bullet in the ceiling is post homicide. Okay.
Correct.
Why was that? I think Greg tried to answer why they didn't hear a shot or a bullet hole or anything else. The hole in the ceiling is, are we positive that just wasn't poked through or something to look like it? Do we know that for sure? Were the bullet fragments found up in there? Did they pull those out? We have pictures of that?
Yes, they did have pictures of the fragment up in the attic, and when you look at and I don't know enough about bullet holes and entries, but when you look at the initial hole before Joe Cooksley decides to put his finger up in there and make it bigger, it does look like a bullet could have been shot through there, because you see kind of an indentation, rounded indentation before the big hole appears. Right.
So, and that's perfect. And so why did they do that? What was the reason to do that afterwards? That makes it look sloppier.
Well, my thought is that somebody figured out they didn't have the right number of bullets. They didn't have, where's David? They have these others. We know that went to Kamel and Rania and we know that one was in the floor. This one was, you know, just ejected or dropped. Oops, where's David's bullet?
Yeah, okay.
That's my thought, and it could be totally wrong, but...
Yeah, no, I don't...
Yeah, there were people in and out of that house, not in and out, but there were people who would leave stuff at the front door stoop of David's house, probably starting January 17th, maybe starting on the 19th or so, but it's just kind of weird that this is the only quote-unquote suspicious activity call that is mentioned that we know of. Maybe there's more that we just don't know about, but it's just like what makes, I think you guys brought up a good point, what makes this one different from anyone else that would have just been dropping off stuff at the house? Because when the cops show up, there were things in front of that house, but I guess maybe what made it different is that now you have somebody who goes into the house.
Well, okay, Greg, oh, I am so sorry, Catherine.
I'm sorry. I have bad timing. But
I know. I got short thoughts, so I always interrupt. I'm so bad. I get something on my mind. I want to say it.
I know. I think we all do that. But you know, I was, you know, this to me shows that is Chris Klien lying yet one more time? It's possible. I'm not saying he's lying. Please don't try to sue me. Well, go ahead, try. I take that back. Go ahead, try it. But because you know, he states that he saw this on the 19th. If I'm following what you guys and what this is saying correctly, on the 19th of January. He's telling this to Bone on the 17th of February. Now, how can that be true? Because the cleaning crew would have seen this quote-unquote obvious defect. They didn't document it. They didn't call because when they found the fragment that rolled out from the rug, and to me that's perfectly normal. That makes lots of sense. I know a lot of people go, oh, they missed that. Well, it makes lots. It's hard to often find these and see these bullet fragments. So the fact that the cleaning crew was rolling something up and as they're moving it, it fell onto the floor. Okay, it makes sense to me. They called, but see, they called it in. That's the point. And yet they're coming in and they're seeing every spot marked. They see and they know, but yet not one mention from the cleaning crew about the ceiling. So it couldn't have been there up until the 24th.
Well,
yeah, or you also have, because remember, the cops are called back in there. So the cops are back in there on January 20th to find item 53. They obviously have to look up. There's no obvious defect that anybody sees. So great point.
And see, that's my point. Is like up until the 24th, there is no hole in that ceiling. And then magically, between the 24th and then the 17th, we'll give it that date, even though they didn't show up to the 18th, somehow that hole now appears.
Yeah, and then, you know, an 8-foot ceiling's at eye level, guys. We know that. And the second thing is that, you remember that movie Sunshine Cleaning? Remember that when the two gals went out and they would clean up crime scenes? Has anybody, have any of you contacted a company like that and see any kind of protocols or what's the average cleanup on a homicide or triple homicide? Has anybody done that? Because I have no idea how long it takes.
I was looking at it. I was looking at it last night, and it... Oh, sorry. You can continue.
Well, no, I was just saying, I reached out to crime scene cleaners. They have a YouTube channel, and they also have a Facebook channel. And I asked them how thorough that they were, and they're plus they videotape everything, and so can watch what they do and how they handle the scenes that they go in, and they're looking at everything. They're looking up, down, they're spraying their chemicals. Right. Everywhere. They're very, very thorough, and I have yet to see this company miss something and have to go back.
Yeah, there you go. I thank you for that, Catherine. I didn't look that up.
So I looked at the time frame that most places will generally go, and I started looking from like different company to different company. I mean, they all differ, but they generally, it's around anywhere depending on the size of the crime scene, of course, and everything that's affected. It can take anywhere between 4 hours up to, I think they said it was like 3 or 4 days. So once they come in, I mean, if we're taking 3 to 4 days to do it, I mean, it's got to be a huge crime scene. I mean, with this, I mean, obviously it took around that time because I believe they started, if I'm not mistaken, I believe they started on I think it was the 20th, if I'm not mistaken, I'll have to look into it again, but I want to say it was around the 20th. So.
Yeah, and they appeared to be very thorough. They got everything. You know, they made sure that when the family did come back into the house, nothing was missed. So I find it extremely difficult to believe that a professional service like that cleaning crew would miss a bullet hole in the ceiling, because that would be so traumatic to a family if they walked in and saw that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
that was why we tried to contact them, and that was one of the things that we wanted to know was did you see it? Because obviously anybody who walks into that house after January 17th, it's safe. I could believe that they would believe that the cops saw that hole. So for them, seeing the hole isn't nothing big. It's just, okay, there's a hole up top, there's a hole in the ground, nothing big. Nobody knows at this point that the cops have never seen this hole.
Right.
So, anyways.
Yep, exactly.
All right, Dan, if you want to continue.
Yeah, I'd like to continue on. And just before I continue on, the person that made that call for 911 that we still don't know the name, I'm sure a lot of the neighbors are following this case. Feel free to come forward. You don't have to give your name, address, nothing like that. But it would be interesting to do an interview either on the record or off the record as far as what prompted you to make that call. Please reach out to us in a direct message or something on that Justice for David Crowley and Family page, if you're willing. It's 6 years later. It would be interesting to hear the details of what caused that 911 call to be called.
Right.
Oh, Dan, I wanted to say something along the lines you were talking about now, and digressing back a few minutes ago is it's like the Philip Marshall case, and even then Greg went up there like Wayne Madsen did, and there wasn't a lot of Pineapple Express between the neighbors and them. If there's a triple homicide or 3 bodies in a little neighborhood like that, everybody's going to know about it in an hour, and there should have been a lot more calls. I mean, I would be looking out my window for 3 weeks if that happened and there was crime scene tape up. I mean, that's a disturbing thing. So I think there was a lot more that came in that they're not reporting.
Okay.
Activity around the house afterwards, I think, in some ways. But everybody knew about that. I mean, I'd be picking out my curtains.
True.
Continuing
on page 75, Detective Brian Bone and Detective Sean McKnight entered the Crowley house once again at 3 p.m. on Friday, February 18th, 2015. We immediately found what appeared to be a bullet hole in the ceiling, wrote Detective Bone, quote, near the front door and adjacent to the living room, unquote. The detective also wrote about the possible trajectory of the bullet, speculating the shot must have come from the living room area. Makes sense. In the master bedroom, the detectives found the closet open with a ladder underneath the attic access point. Quote, we looked for access to the attic area of the house, Detective Bone reported, and found that the attic access from the master bedroom closet was open. This had not been open at the time of our initial search of the home on January 17, 2015. I contacted the BCA crime scene team and advised them of our findings. I requested they assist us in documenting the damage and assist in looking for the bullet in the ceiling attic area, end quote. Should I stop there?
Sure.
My only question about this is, if they didn't open the attic, who did and why?
Oh, I got another question. Whose ladder is it then? Because it's not from the Crowley household. I mean, I thoroughly checked. I mean, there is not the ladder from the Crowley household at all.
Oh, good point. Good point. I didn't know that, William. You looked through the other crime scene photos, and that ladder does not exist. Okay. Interesting.
Pops up nowhere else.
Wow. Oh.
Well, what would have been your thought?
That's a valid point.
If you walked in?
A good point. Stephen, did you hear that question?
No, I didn't. Go ahead.
Oh, I said, what would have been your thought if you were the police officer and walked in and saw that ladder and you knew it was not something you or your other officers had done?
Oh, I mean, it would spark my interest. Yeah, I mean, it's there was like you guys are going back to. There was just too many people in that house, and I don't know how many detectives and everything. There might have been some crime scene forensics people in there that during the report, and they didn't do much. But I think there was just too much activity in the house. I would think it's different. Yeah, I mean, I've gone back to crime scenes, and it's basically. And the other thing too is you usually park a patrol car out there for a few days. Nobody goes in. I don't understand. That should have been there for the neighborhood. You don't just walk away. Do
you fingerprint that ladder? Try to get some DNA.
What's it, wood or aluminum, guys? I didn't look at it.
It looks like it's aluminum. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably. I mean, I would definitely throw some dust on it, and you are gonna get some prints off. It's aluminum, and it's gonna be smooth in some areas. Sure, might as well print it. Yeah, why not? I mean, yeah, absolutely.
That's all I got on that one.
Yeah.
It says, going forward, it says, with the house secured, Detective Sean McKnight remained in the driveway while Detective Bowen obtained the search warrant. The search warrant was signed by District Court Judge Sean M. Moynihan at 4:25 p.m. on February 18, 2018. The Minnesota BCA crime scene team, led by Joe Cooksley, arrived at 5:45 p.m. The team consisted of Joe Cooksley, Beth Wolf, Lance Lehman, Agent Chris Olson, and one observer.
And it's not clear.
So, Joe Cooksley was the one who gets there. He led the crime scene team for the BCA, the Minnesota BCA. He's the one who stuck that finger in there and ruined the crime scene of the ceiling hole. Is that something that's normal? That seems odd.
Yeah, it definitely, I think so.
Cooksley was also there on the 17th, and
yes,
he does a lot of notes, a lot of things. He writes out a lot of stuff, and I mean, we must have at least 40 or 50 pages of just his written notes here, and from January 17th, no mention of any bullet hole in the ceiling. There were tons of people. There's a whole list of people that were in the house on January 17th, 2015. None of them saw this bullet hole.
Yeah, and it is the job of the BCA to look for other evidence. And they saw nothing, documented nothing. And it wasn't, like you were stating, it wasn't just Cooksley. He had an entire team there on the 17th for hours, and nobody documents it.
That's suspicious activity right there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nice plug.
Moving forward, it says, Detective McKnight stated that the bullet hole was, quote, near the entryway in close proximity to where the Christmas tree had been, end quote. He goes on to say the BCA crime scene team took measurements of the bullet hole and collected the bullet for further examination. Quote, during the initial processing of the crime scene, Detective McKnight explained, we knew that we could not account for several bullets that may have been fired from the gun used, end quote. So by the time they left on the 17th, the first day, the numbers didn't, the math didn't add up, right? And then the last, should I go on with the last paragraph?
Are we paused, Greg, or is that just for the video effect?
It looks like Greg may have paused it. I'm going to hang tight.
Yeah, my main screen just went down, but we should still be... Let's see if I can bring this back up. That was weird. Just completely died all of a sudden. Okay, I'm going to try to...
How about on Twitch, William? Is that okay?
I mean, it still says paused on mine.
Yeah, I'll probably say pause till I can get this screen sharing going again. Great timing.
Right.
We're on our last paragraph, too. We've got one paragraph to go here. Then we can discuss. This is all very interesting.
Let me know if this comes back on at any time here. Looks like it's back on. It says it's sharing. You guys should see it here.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay.
Now it looks good.
Okay. Modern technology. All right.
Oh, yeah.
The joys.
There we go.
All right, I'll continue on. Is that okay, Greg?
Yeah, please continue on.
Okay. On February 19th, 2015, AVPD Detective Brian Bone reviewed the original crime scene images. On 2/19/15, Detective Bone reported, "I viewed the images taken from the initial search of the house." This would have been on the 17th of January. "In viewing these photos, I could see the hole in the ceiling, which we discussed on 2/18/15. This is a very important paragraph, and also what I would call discrepancies, if not cover-up or some little white lies you're being told. What are your thoughts, everybody?
Well, all I know is that the photo that they're claiming is the one that shows the bullet hole. This is nothing. I mean, this would be torn apart in a court of law in 2 seconds flat. It would be thrown out because there are no close-ups. There's nothing to really state, yes, that was a bullet hole. There's a slight glare or bright spot, if you will, in one of the photos. But is that just reflection coming from the camera? You see other bright spots as well. Why isn't that the bullet hole? So, yeah, I don't buy it, because they took close-ups of everything else, which is how you're supposed to. You take it from a distance, you move in closer, 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 and then you assign it a number, and nothing like that was done. So they're trying to CYA at this point, and to me, they failed miserably.
Well, this is the photo. Go ahead, William. I was just going to say this is the photo here.
Oh, no, I mean, I'm just saying, yeah, no, I agree that this definitely would be torn apart.
And like what Catherine said, there would be photographs of different angles, different distances, all of that same hole, just like we saw with what they took on February 18th. And it would have been assigned a number. It would have been used as evidence. So the statement is a blatant lie, I think. And we get back into this, the law enforcement angle, I'll call it, of not necessarily going with a cover-up or not, but covering their asses enough, because the pride of these detectives are so great that they do not ever want to admit a mistake. It's one of the faults, I think, of law enforcement is once they get an answer to something, they'll never ever retract it or go back. They will lie, like in this case, to avoid admitting that they made a mistake. But their job as public servants to society is to get the story right. We're not worried about your pride. We're not worried about your ego. We want you to solve the crime. That's it. But you got that thin blue line that they will do anything they can and back up each other to never, ever admit that they have made a mistake. And I've seen this in multiple crimes. And so that thin blue line does exist. They are out there to, they'll never, ever admit. I've done 2 interviews with a former Minneapolis police officer himself. And he says, the hoops that you will jump through to avoid ever admitting you made a mistake, you'll gladly have someone else make a statement that corroborates yours, even if both are a lie, to ever avoid getting the black eye of your department for your staff in a police department. This is how bad this is. And I said, this is not what being a public servant is all about. We want you to get it right. We don't care how confident you are, how big your egos are, and how many awards you win. Your job is to solve the crime. So, he said, well, no, it's a very different story out there, very different, real life, very different case than what you think it is.
Are they scared of being sued? Is that what it is, or why not admit
No, I think it's the ego. I think it's the ego. They will never admit that they're wrong. I'm guessing, and I'd place a bet here that these Apple Valley police officers here over time, as each and every one of them slowly retire, we're not going to see them come forward as whistleblowers to say, you know what, I worked that case back in 2015, and we were wrong on 15 different points. And I'm just coming out now because I don't have an affiliation with the police department, just to admit it. These kind of things will never come forward. So that's my beef with the whole thing. It's a very proud group. If they're good or bad at their job, doesn't matter.
And Dan,
Stephen, I'm sure will tell you that it's very common that they will never do that. It's
right, and I think sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. Oh my gosh, Stephen, you or I, we're both in a battle for the microphone.
Oh no, go. I just want to know. Dan's right about something, but go ahead. I'll rebut afterwards.
Okay, cool. Because I think you will find this absolutely so interesting. Because when I first started doing videos, and if I made a mistake in my next video, I would come back and say, okay, well, you know what? I made a mistake in that thought. So here's what I found out now. I actually had a police officer contact me. They never gave me their name, but they verified that they were a police officer and asked that I never, I'll put it this way. They asked that I never reveal who they were. But they contacted me, and their exact words to me were, you need to stop saying you made a mistake. And I asked them, I'm like, why? I did make a mistake. I need to go and correct that. And they're like, you never apologize. You never say you made a mistake. If someone points it out, you move on and you ignore it. And I went back and forth with this person for a long time, and I just could not agree with what they were saying to me. And I'm like, and I will still say if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. If I misunderstood, then I misunderstood. And I don't see how that's a bad thing.
All right, okay. No, so I just want to say, I'll make it as brief as I can. I've been involved in everything Dan's saying and you're saying. I've had an IA on me a couple times. I've been insubordinate as a police officer, everything else. This is what I'm going to say. If you're a police officer and you screw a case up, right, like this one here, this case is either a mistake, staked in by several people, plural, or it's a cover-up, and I believe more it's a cover-up related to the project, and it was sloppy. From working in the Bay Area, which I think California has the best police training, and the Bay Area has an LAPD, and not the Valley with all the drugs, but working as a Bay Area cop in San Francisco, is that I guarantee you this would never get, everything that's happened you guys are talking about, what Dan's talking about, would never get past the sergeant's desk. Didn't happen, and I never saw it. I never saw any of the stuff we're seeing now. And in saying that is that there is a brotherhood, but I've been in situations where it's, you know what, you're called in, and you know what, you tell the truth. It's not the television stuff you see, because you know what, if you tell the truth, you're going to have more people backing you than not telling the truth. It's not like 40 guys all of a sudden dish you and say, this guy didn't, if he did it, screw him, I'm sorry. Now, 40 guys aren't going to lose their pensions over one guy screwing up. I've been there with guys screwed up. I crossed the police car. I didn't lie. They tried to get me to lie. I wouldn't lie, and guess what? I kept my job. So, yeah, there's some things that have changed. I think Apple Valley, this is not a mistake, man. These guys covered this thing up. Nobody misses this kind of stuff. This thing is deep, and that's why we're doing this.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, guys. These guys aren't that stupid. There's no way. But, the training really blows when you get out of certain big cities and stuff. And I can see that just with the Chauvin case and all that, and I got my opinions on that. But the training in California, New York, out of Houston, some of the bigger departments, San Diego's pretty good. The training's pretty good, and you get out a little further, Midwest and everything, and it's different. It really is, and the rest of that. But, as soon as you're connected, at the Philip Marshall, Philip Haney, David Crowley, anybody, and, Danny Casarello, you're a target, and that's what happened, and they hired the wrong guys and sloppy, because, listen, if the Deep State wanted to do this and hired this, and it was a shadows ops, but the shadows ops wanted to make it look sloppy, they would have put the tags on Mason and all these other guys, they think, or we think, or whoever did this. And those guys they'd go down. Think about that. Those guys they're not that kind of, they have no power brokerage, Their dog's not even in a fight. They don't even have a dog. So if they did this, the deep state could turn around and say, hey, we got the guys. Why not? Let's solve the case. No, this might have been done vigilante style. Maybe.
Well, that's interesting. That's definitely a different take on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought about it, Catherine. Yeah, I did. That's what they do. Look at all Illinois. Contra. All of a sudden, he's a fall guy. But you know what? And he knew what was going on, but he was doing his duty. Nobody really hates the guy. It's like Furman, same thing. I mean, he whether he planned this stuff or not, it's everybody's pointing at him. The same thing here. They would have pointed at these guys. This was a sloppy murder. They would have tied these guys up and they'd be put away, just like with McVeigh in Oklahoma. Sure got him real quick. They would get these guys real quick too. So this might be, we might be looking at this is these guys making it to look like this because they're smart enough, and there was probably attention, and there's probably things they knew, and there was people watching them that they say, let's take this angle and let's look at it. It's a deep state shadow ops hit, but they're just too sloppy, and these guys aren't pros. That's what I'm thinking more now.
And it's the other thing with a case like this, what I believe, I'm not sure about the others of you, and I'm sure you probably do, but we've got multiple layers in this case. We have number one, we have a triple homicide, and then we have a cover-up almost after the fact of that.
Right.
In addition to this, at almost a federal, state, or federal level. So there's many tentacles here. I think that there were a handful of good detectives potentially on this case, but it's not going to go up. It's got to go through the chain of command. And so when you get these people that aren't going to allow it, I think even 6 years later, if someone was going to come out and be a whistleblower in this case to say, look, I worked in this case 6 years ago, and I think we did some things that were wrong, I think that, too, would be covered up, and that would not make the evening news cycle or a 60-minute segment at all. That would not be allowed to air, I think. On a normal case, but this would be squashed. Something like this, I think, would be squashed. So when
I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, listen. I just talked. Yeah, you're right. I just talked to a guy in the Yosemite case whose uncle knew some stuff, who's a correctional officer, and they threatened his pension. And I just related to this right here. Same thing. They'll threaten the guy's pension, and he's not going to say a word.
Now, when I talked to Officer Broughton in this case, after he retired, I think William and Stephen weren't following the case yet, but once I saw that he retired and he was a prominent name in this actual case, I reached out and just left a phone message and said, I'm covering this case, I'm investigating. I see that you're off the case now and you're no longer connected to the Apple Valley Police Department. I'd like to get your thoughts on some of the sections of the case for a possible interview or even just simply meet for coffee. He responded back, yes, I'm interested in talking with you. I'd like to share. What's that? Sorry?
Oh, sorry. I guess it definitely looks like there's a little lag somewhere going on.
Oh, gotcha. And so when he said he'd like to call back, and then I got a call back later, he says, you know what, I ran it by the police chief, and they said I shouldn't be talking to anyone about the case. So then he said, please don't call me back. So
wow, there you go.
This is what we're dealing with here. Someone who called back to me on their own to say, I'm interested in talking about the case. I no longer work. I have no connections, and I'd be willing to chat or sit down for a cup of coffee with an investigator. He was open to that. Right. And then quickly later, nope, not interested. Mm-hmm. He called his superior. Remember, he's not even working there anymore. His former superior, and he squashed it. That's
that's how, you know what? That's the same as the Marines. And you go back to your chief, Dan. I definitely see that, and it's, it's almost like you can't blame the guy, but he should have. I mean, you had him on the hook and he lost him. I mean, you did the right thing. He goes back. And that's how that good old boys club is there forever. It really is.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know who the supervisor was that kind of squashed the whole thing. But at least you tried, Dan.
Yeah, you did.
My guess would
and
be
one
it
of
was
those,
the chief.
even without getting the answer necessarily that we wanted, we got the answer. We got the correct answer. The fact that it was squashed gives me more than anything I would have learned from having a cup of coffee with this person. That told me.
Oh,
that told me
you know what?
tons of
Yeah, because he wouldn't have said anything to you anyway. You know, I mean, really, what's he going to say to you unless it's like, you know, it's like not a movie, but it's just getting to the right guy, and it's really tough. You know.
What would they be scared of? What would a supervisor say? You know what? No, we can't. I mean, if everything is just, you know, this is a case. We know David Crowley is guilty. What would they be scared of to talk with Dan?
Listen, the police department is like it's like a mini CIA or something. I mean, I'm working a case now with a dirty cop, we think, and you know what? It's a brotherhood, man. I mean, listen. My old chief after I left became the chief. He was my training officer 30 years ago, and he became the chief. And he's on Facebook, and I could call him up and talk to him about something and listen to his advice 30 years later, because that's how it was. And I only worked for him for 2 years. That's how it is. It really is like that. It kind of sticks with you, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But when you become a PI and an advocate like with you guys, I join your club, it puts me out in left field, you know? It really does, and I'm good with that. I've been there my whole life. So it's okay. But, yeah.
Well, the reason why I had put up this photo here, I know I'm having some internet issues, but I don't know. William, is it coming okay on your stream right now? Okay.
Yeah, everything on my lag and everything is looking pretty good. So.
Okay, good, because I may need that copy. Depending on
no problem.
Matter how good this goes. But
well, I'll be honest. I just realized I actually had the audio output off, so I'm like, oh, the conversation was off. So I was sitting there like, oh no.
We can work on that.
We can
no
just
problem.
Throw.
Yeah, I've got a couple backups here, and that could be why my computer just all of a sudden decided to crash, because I'm recording on 2 separate sources for this particular reason. In case things like this happen, these things do happen. But the reason why I have this photo up here is because, as Dan Hinnon was saying, we had been trying to get the photo that they were talking about. So the photo where Detective Bone says, hey, we looked on February 19, 2015, we went through all of these photos, and reviewing the photos, I could see the hole in the ceiling. So I said, okay, let's ask them what photo that is, but, you know, or were there multiple photos? This is the photo that they came back with. Now, first they came back with the photo of the basement photo, which I said, no, that's not the photo that I asked for. Then they came back with the photo that they took on February 18th. And again, I said, no, that's not the photo that I asked for. Then COVID happened, blah, blah, blah. We went back and forth. And maybe about a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago, they finally were able to find a photo. And this is the photo that they sent me. This is BCA 4408, I believe. But this is not an Apple Valley photo. This was a BCA photo. When I talked with the person and said, well, this, you know, so this is a BCA photo. You said the AVPD has a photo of this, and the person that I spoke to or communicated with said that this was not a BCA photo. So I still need to get some clarification on that. But regardless, this is the one photo that they have that they say shows that there was a bullet hole on January 17th, the day that the bodies were found. Even though everybody missed it, even though nobody knew about it until Chris Klien. Without Chris Klien, they would not know about this bullet hole. But this is the image, the only image that they came back and said that shows it. And as you can see, it's photoed from a distance. So again, I don't know if we can maybe get somebody to really take it. I think Catherine may have done this. She had taken a deep dive in this photo knowing that this was the only one that we had that may even show it.
Yeah, I did.
I think you did a whole video on this, Catherine, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I did a couple of them, and I can't remember. There's someone who's part of another group who decided that they wanted to believe David was guilty, but at a time, we actually stayed up all night, literally all night, going back and forth on this, doing this photo and looking at it from every angle. They came to the conclusion believing that this was the bullet hole. My software told me it was not the bullet hole, so it's neither here nor there. We just both came to different decisions. But I couldn't match it up at all, and it just didn't make sense. Yes, there's a light spot if you zoom real in very close, but that light spot doesn't match up to where the actual hole is in the photos that were found. It's close, but it's not there. But what I find interesting is the wording from Detective Bone, where he states, in viewing these photos, I could see the hole in the ceiling, which we discovered on 2/18. Now, did you have a hole, or was it only discovered on the 18th? How can you see a hole that you didn't discover prior? If it's
Correct.
so obvious in this photo now, which it is not, because I dare anybody to look at this and tell me where it's at, if you did not know with the follow-up photos that were, you know, taken in February, you would not be able to point and tell me where that so-called bullet hole is, according to this photo. You can't. So I just find his words interesting. Okay, I worked for attorneys for a long time, and they taught me a lot of stuff. They really teach you how to read and listen to what people say. You listen to double negatives, you listen to full context, you listen to, you know, like in this context, I see a hole in the ceiling, but we discovered it on the 18th. It can't be both ways. You can have a hole there, but then you only discover it later. Not in this type of situation, where you're saying it's so obvious.
Yeah, I think when I read this, that was proof that nobody had seen it until February 18th. That sealed the deal.
Yeah, and this is Dan once again. If I just in conclusion, I got to run here in a few minutes. I'd like to say in the three pages, all we covered in this episode is 3 pages in the book, essentially. There were 2 lies. One by Detective Bone, saying they knew there was a bullet hole there earlier, when that was an outright lie. The second one is Klien saying that he was in the house with David's father. David's father says, I was never in the house with Klien. One of those 2 is lying. So in a matter of 3 pages out of this entire book, this is, I think, the best part that Greg did in writing this book, is that he's got a 200-page book. And there's more lies in this book. And they're not made up. They're actual factual statements, quotes from people on the record that we've exposed. There's 2 right here in these simple 3 pages. Now, when this first came out about seeing the bullet hole or not, I know a lot of speculation was distraction. A lot of folks in the various groups following this case said it was obstructed by the Christmas tree. I remember this coming out. They say we couldn't see it because the Christmas tree was there. And I think that was a form of distraction to get us off chasing the wrong goose here. It had nothing to do with the Christmas tree. They did not see it, meaning it was not even there. So that's the first things we encountered when this whole bullet hole came up several years ago. Is I think the first line of defense, they said that the Christmas tree was in the way, we couldn't see it. It blocked our view. That was the type of terminology we ran into by the naysayers right away. And now here we are 6 years after the incident, and we have the proof that that bullet hole was not there the day of the crime. So, interesting case here. But if there are any other questions, I got to jump off here in a few minutes, guys. Thanks for your time for everybody, but you guys can certainly stay on longer.
Thank you, Dan.
Oh, thank you, Dan.
Yeah, I think that will basically conclude this portion of the podcast. We are always going to come back here every month on the first of every month. July 1st, 2021 will be the next show. We're going to talk about some of the details about the people that were in this house. And I want to thank Dan Hinnon. I want to thank everybody for joining us here. And I'm going to put William Rail on the spot right now because in preparation for our next show, he has helped create a couple slideshows here that we're gonna end this show with. So the podcast is basically over. This is the bonus show here. So if you're still listening, if you're still with us, thank you all. And I'm going to hand it over to William Rail, and we're going to discuss some things. We're going to look at some very interesting things. First, I want to thank also Catherine and Stephen, both who have done some great work on this case. And Stephen, just if you're still there, Stephen, I'm hoping you can kind of let people know about your book, because I always forget to plug your book and to plug it. I'm telling you, I've now read this thing 4 times. We're going to do an in-depth look into your book. So please tell people about the book that you wrote, some of the complications, because I'll tell you, man, the more that I read your book, the more tips, the more good ideas, the more things that I see how relevant your book is to this case. There are similarities, there are parallels that are just fascinating to me, and it's just like, wow, okay, corruption happens, and you are deep into this case. So if you could just take a few minutes to tell us about the book that you've written, what the title is, where people can get it, and kind of what the subject matter is. Because I'll tell everybody right now, it is very similar to this case in certain ways.
Oh, thank you, Greg. Last week you read it 3 times, but anyway, it's Ultimate Prey, the true story behind Yosemite murders, sightseer murders in 1999. And prior to that, I was a police officer years before that, and then I was tied into a bounty, and I was indicted and everything else, and escaped it from a setup from the same county that was involved in the Yosemite murders 5 years later. And I had already, danced with these guys, the DA and everything, trying to nail me on some stuff, and we beat it. And here was the largest murder case in the United States that year, and I had a bounty that a guy bailed out, and I chased him, and he was involved, and I started writing about it.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating book. For some reason, it's not coming up on the screen here, but I'll definitely add it later on.
Thank you. Yeah,
put that in there. But yeah, I mean, the price has gone up since we last checked, so it's like an extra $1. But it was $9.99. Now it's at $10.
I know. You know what?
What's up with that?
I published it in 2012, and it was $2.99 on the ebook, and it was $9.89 since 2012. And you know what? I'll be honest with you. Since there's this deal with Hulu, possibly for a miniseries, a documentary, I raise the price $1 each way because
That's great.
I'm going to sell some books. Yeah, I make an extra $1 a month. You write books. You're a great author, by the way. I'm reading some stuff right now, Greg, on your book that I didn't read, and I got to make. Cause I'm working on all these damn PI cases, and I don't get a chance. I do too much writing, but I got to pay more attention to the gray stage because there's stuff in here that I should have known about that I could have probably mentioned. That I think we could nail these clowns.
Yeah.
Really well done, man. I can't believe the information you got on. From everybody to write this book.
Yeah, it was a team. It was a lot of people involved, and many of the people that are listening to this and watching this, they're all part of this, of researching this case, of looking at what the facts are, talking about it. We have so many great people, and I just want to thank all of them. I know many of them want to remain private for their own reasons, various reasons. And so, I just want to make sure that they recognize that we do recognize all of your help with this case. And every day we're getting new people that are helping with this. There's so many people that are trying to help with this case that I just, because of my personal life, because of things, I can't always reach out to them the way that I would want to. I can't keep up with them. But please, keep continuing to do your research on this case. The more people that we have doing their own research, doing their own private investigations into this case. It's crazy how I see we all are pretty much coming to the same conclusion. It all comes back to the same sources and everything. So I just want to thank you all for that. And Stephen, definitely, I'm sure we're all happy to have you here, to have you be part of this.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. William Rail. Let's see if I can get this up here. He is the host of Strange Investigations. He's always on Twitch. Well, how many episodes do you have now of this case? 27? Are you almost at 30?
28 if you include this. I think 29.
Okay, cool. Right on.
Yeah, most of them are actually, most of them will be going up to YouTube. It's just because they're so large. I have to kind of, produce file size, do what I can to basically get them on YouTube, but they take for a while to basically get them up, and yeah, it's pain. But right now I think we're up to episode, 6 on YouTube.
Nice.
I know that BitChute and Rumble, like I'll throw them up there and they disappear. It's just like what's going on here? And it's not like I'm getting a strike or anything. So I don't really know why they're not staying, especially with BitChute. They don't stay up. I'm not really sure what's going on with that one, but yeah, no, it's been a journey for sure.
I'm sure. Well, now I know you had recently helped us with some of these conversations that I've had, and I'm hoping that you'll kind of take lead here and explain what we're seeing here on the screen.
Alrighty, so can I explain who these texts are from?
Yes, please do.
Okay. All right, so I'm not going to give out his number. Obviously, as you can see, they're redacted. But these right here are text conversations, and there is much more than this. But these are the ones that directly pertain to January 19th. And if you read into it, I guess you can say technically through the 24th or 23rd or whatever. But it's between Greg Fernandez Jr. and Mason Hendricks. And there is definitely some really strange behavior when it comes to the text from not Chris Hendricks, but Mason Hendricks. As we discussed earlier, there's the ego. The guy is very, very full of himself. As Stephen also stated, basically when you get these really loud people, they're generally involved. From what my knowledge base is on this, I've read plenty of different cases, especially about serial killers. I'm not saying he is a serial killer, but this is somebody that wants that kind of a level of attention. They want to go and try and steer the narrative, yada, 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 basically. They just they want to go and get this thing going where it needs to go to kind of keep focus on it to some degree, but not on them per se, potentially. So, but the thing is I noticed here, as you guys can see from the title of the slide, it's who. We see that there are, I think, 5 people listed. We get Mason Hendricks. When he refers to Danny, that's Danny August Mason, Dan Jr. and Adam. And they are also referring to Chris Klien also being there as well. So, just do the math there. There's, 5 people. And basically they talk about that 911 call, claiming that somebody had called, reporting Chris Klien's plate number. This directly goes back with the police report or whatever, that when I think it was it Bone or McKnight that interviewed? I'm already started slipping my mind. But I want to say it was Bone. Greg, was it Bone or was it McKnight?
Yeah, that interviewed Klien?
Yes.
Yeah, that was Bone.
Okay. So Bone basically, that's already going to kind of confirm this. But then we're also getting like the whole thing that they didn't contact him until a month later. Well, we know when he contacted him was on the 19th. Or basically, maybe, yeah, it was like a month later than after that. So, it's weird because they're claiming 23rd or whatever that they were there, but you're seeing not necessarily true. It's already kind of adding up that it's there's some lies here. He also goes on to say that he also found the bullet home for the ceiling bullet. Also went on to say that it also had David's DNA on the bullet, but when last I checked, his DNA was never confirmed on the bullet fragment itself. So, and then he also gives out quite a bit of details about David's habits. To me, this right here screams there's something off. There's a lot off with this guy. Just the first one over here on the left, there just is a lot off with this conversation.
Yeah, and I just want to stop you for 1 second, just to see if Catherine, if you're still here, I want to see it. Is this the first time that you're looking at this information?
Yes, I was sitting here reading this, going, oh, yeah,
right. It's a treasure trove.
It says a lot, and just wow.
The other thing I also want to mention too is you see the second one here. He can't remember the date, right? That's just to me that seems too much of a kind of a coincidence. Just why can't you remember the date? You're remembering that, okay, well he's you're remembering all these details about it, but you can't remember the date.
But he says that the cops got it wrong.
Yeah,
exactly.
I was reading that going, why would he say the police most likely got it wrong if he doesn't remember?
Exactly. But he also goes on to say here, Chris couldn't have gone there because he had no idea how to get there. He had to meet up and follow us. Okay, so you're confirming, A, once again, Chris was there. B, you're also saying that he had to follow you guys. That means there's other people that were there, and if you go back on Klien's conversation with Bone, well, now it's no longer Dan Jr., Dan Sr. In fact, it's just Dan Jr. is the only connection between these conversations here. So I found that a little peculiar, but also that Chris didn't know where he was going. Kind of weird. And then, of course, you go over here on the final one, and he said he was never there on his own. So also just kind of contributing to that as well. So.
Right, because that would mean that on January 19th, that Mason Hendricks is saying that it wasn't just Chris Klien there, that there were, Chris Klien was there with other people, which to me always raised the question of, okay, well, why would the 911 caller say that, there was a report of a suspicious person and not persons?
Exactly.
Now, Hendricks doesn't know, and at this point, I believe, because I do believe this was in 2016, at this point it sounds like he knows a lot more than what I knew. So he's trying to get me to believe that what he's telling me is true, which I was willing to, until obviously we got some documents, and the documents did not line up, and that's when things changed.
Exactly. I mean, I could see it was like you were kind of like, for the most part, kind of just okay, well, I'm going to get your side of things. I mean, definitely for the entire thing. And there's, 80, I think it was 85 or 88 pages of documents here. There was like 2 pages, I think, 1 or 2 pages where it was Cedro that was thrown in there as well. But when it comes to the rest of the documentation, I mean, it's a lot. And the guy he's really he's focused on trying to get you to pay attention to him the whole time. I mean, there was even a couple of times where he would message you a couple hours later because you didn't respond. And, I mean, he's just really trying to, hold that attention on that. So I thought it was interesting. So we can definitely go on to the next slide real quick. So right here is where we get everything kind of connecting here. You can see I've already gone to the left. These are the 5 people that were listed by Hendricks. Now on this, this little meme on the bottom should definitely hold up on this one. So basically, you got right here at the top. He was there with me, Dan Jr. and Adam. All of us watched Danny Mason very closely because of many reasons. I was the one who noticed the bullet hole, and so neighbor reported Chris Klien's plate number to the pigs. Okay, so obviously by calling them pigs, you obviously have no respect for the police at that point. So obviously, I'm kind of a little leery about how he feels about the rest of it. But then he later goes on to call him the police, right? So the police didn't contact him until a month later or something like this. And basically, you're getting all these different kinds of things going along with it. There's multi-layers on this. It's peculiar. But then he said he got a call from David's dad saying the police had found the missing bullet up in the attic. So if you go off of this, I believe that was also it was on February 19th. 17th or 19th. It was one of those. It's around that area. After they had contacted Klien. So we're getting this, and so this is basically after that, at least that day. My suspicion's kind of leaning more towards that day. Saying the police had found the missing bullet up in the attic, and then he had told Senior that he needed to follow up with those, that he had to go and basically get back at him because they already went in, they found it, and apparently, and this is what I want to go and see if we can get a FOIA for, is getting that voicemail that Dan Senior had allegedly left. based on what Hendricks is saying here. Because once again, if we can shoot this down, this makes this guy even more suspicious. But once again, these texts already make him overly suspicious. And the fact that he already knew David's DNA was on the bullet when they literally just got it, that raises some questions. And my questions, I mean, I'm pointing my finger quite a bit. I'm not saying he did it, but, you know, I mean, we could definitely point he seems a little suspicious here. And also, like I said, he also knew so much about the magazines and how David operated. He also claims, I believe, in this one, the full magazine you have in that picture was not the one that was used. That was the one at the crime scene. That was the one that was right there. So, what?
Yeah, that is true, because in the first 464 photos that we got, they have a magazine, and that was the one that was found in the gun safe. Yeah. Do we know what date the police or the investigators, the BCA, whoever it was, that the DNA, what's the date of the DNA findings? Because it must have, if I was talking to him in 2016, it must have been early 2016, because this is what, March of 2016, around then.
Or May.
So it must, I mean, he must have been really on top of this as far as getting the documents, getting all the stuff that we have now. It sounds like he had that back in 2016.
Yeah, he had all probably that, right then and there. He was probably right then. The way he's talking, he was in the room with these detectives. In fact, he was there before they were there, and he was actually doing the analysis himself. I mean, the way this guy makes it sound, he's basically making it kind of sound like I was in the. My thought here is that's why I want to know more about the crime scene company, the cleaners, because they were there before the cleaners had got there. If we're going off of what this had stated, so if they were there, but if you go off of what Mason's saying, they were there during the time they would have been there. So we could basically, if we can go and check, okay, did any of them work as cleaners, as crime scene cleaners? I'm curious about that. Maybe because once again, we got in August Mason he was working for some kind of a medical company at that time as well. So
wouldn't that be a conflict? Wouldn't that be a conflict of interest?
Well, I mean, but then again, we know that, I mean, in that same conversation, you guys also talked about another conflict about Chris Peck being in the same room with Dan and, all of this. I mean, it's one of these things like, what? This isn't a conflict, but this is? Okay. So that's my thought on this. And, I mean, it definitely gets worse as we go on through the slides. So.
Well, he's also very curious he's very... He makes it clear that David's DNA was on the bullet, not David's blood.
Yep.
Not his blood. He didn't say David's blood was on the bullet, but the DNA. And for me, at that time, I thought, okay, if this DNA is on there, it must be his blood. Obviously, when we got the documents and I could actually look at it, thankfully, they actually state that blood was not found on that bullet on item 57. If they had not stated that, I would probably still think that, well, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, and if they say DNA is there, then that must mean blood. So thankfully, they were able to be very detailed in that.
They explicitly ruled out blood.
Right.
Yep.
Catherine, any thoughts on some of this new? I always love to hear your thoughts on the newfound stuff that we're seeing kind of here for the first time. So,
it's interesting. Again, it's how he's wording things. He's wording, like William was saying, he's wording stuff like he's in the know, but at the same time, it's almost distracting language as well. Like he says, all of us were watching Danny Mason very closely because of many reasons. Well, that's vague, open-ended, and why? So, is he trying to throw Danny under the bus or what? I mean, if they were only watching him because they were afraid Danny was going to break down and lose it because this was his friend, you would state that. But how he stated it, it leaves you going, aha, so even they were now suspicious of Danny August Mason. At least that's how I'm reading what he's saying, because, again, it's vague, it's distracting, misdirecting.
They're definitely throwing some kind of an umbrella over things. They want you to focus on one thing. Like, here's the highlighted detail we want you to focus on. There's so much here. Why are we, suspicious of this guy? But don't pay any attention to all these details that are a little more fine-tuned. And by little fine-tuned, I mean completely fine-tuned. They're really honed in.
He never, when I go back to the messages, to the phone calls that I've had with Hendricks, he never had anything good to say about Danny August Mason.
Yeah.
I can't really remember anything that he ever said that I thought was good. It was always little things like this, little jabs.
Yeah.
Little jabs, which is what he also did with David Crowley, though, too, if you really think about it.
Yep.
And there's obviously there's a lot of people that do that. Those little jabs that they throw, and it's like, ooh, okay, well, that's, I thought you guys were all kind of on the same side, but no.
Well, throughout the text conversation, all he does is basically say, well, yeah, he was guilty, he's guilty, he is guilty. It's all he keeps saying. And we also see this from a few other members, too. We get to see that from Danny August Mason. We see this from Sean Wright. We also see this from Joseph Seaton if we watch the documentary. I mean, so when it comes down to it, everybody just keeps saying, no, just believe us. We know what we're talking about. We are his friends. We would really rather see him be, assassinated rather than, which I thought that was really weird that they said it that way too, which is, what?
Right. They want to paint the picture, but they want to interpret what the picture means to me. Right. It's like, okay, paint whatever picture that you guys want, but let me interpret it. Let me look at it, and I'll interpret it the way that I want to, if it's the truth. Now, if it's not the truth, then I totally get it. Obviously, you don't want me to try to interpret it the way that I want to. Yeah. But I mean, it's just that's what a narcissist does. That's what it's just it's not with somebody who really wants you to just figure it out for yourself. If you're just letting the truth speak for itself, it's really not the best approach to that. The other thing he says here about the magazines, and usually David always left 2 to 4 rounds of the magazines to not fully stress the springs. I mean, that's pretty interesting. I mean, how would he know that? And that's, if you have, go ahead, Catherine.
I don't want to come to his defense here, but I had made this point a long time ago about this very same thing, because when I was looking at the magazines in the photos, I noticed that there are 12 capacity, but only 11 in the full one. And so I specifically asked people, does anyone know if David did not load his rounds, load his magazines fully? Mainly because I don't know if you guys have ever tried, but he is correct, man. It's an SOB to try to get those last ones in, especially on the higher capacity magazines. So it makes sense to me that David would only put 11 in instead of 12 in the magazine.
Sure.
Because that's what I would do. I wouldn't waste my time, because you spend so much time trying to fight with that sucker, trying to get it in. So for me, I was kind of glad he clarified that for me, because I'm like, okay, so now what does that tell me about the scene? There's one ejected. So that tells me whoever pulled that gun out of the safe racked another round, not knowing one was already in the chamber, and that's why that one went flying out and landed on the floor, because they wanted to make sure it was loaded. So to me, that what he says right there fills in so much that now more of the crime scene makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Well, it's very curious that he would say David had 6 mags. How would he know David had 6 mags there? Yeah. Of course, 6 is the magic number. It just happens to be the same number that, hey, that's what happened. And he says he usually always left 2 to 4, rounds out of the magazine. To me, it was too particular for somebody who didn't really know David that well. Even though he may say that he does, he also makes it very clear in our phone calls that, he wasn't really involved that much with the Gray State Project after the 2012 trailer. David would contact him for questions, and they would go over things like that. But that's really it.
And again, it reminds me here, he reminds me of a Judy situation. He's interjecting information that he clearly doesn't know to be true. Because to leave out, if he had 6 magazines, again, interesting number 6, but he always left out 2 to 4 rounds, but the magazines in the crime scene clearly show he left out 1 out of his 12. 1 round. That is not 2 or 4.
You're talking about the one in the gun safe.
Correct.
Right.
So, which means he would have done them all the same. You don't, I mean, it's a habit you get into, so you load them all the same. If you have 12-round mags, you're going to put 11 in each one. If you have 8-round mags, you can put 7 in each one. Maybe 8, depending on how those springs are. But, yeah, so again, he's making it sound like he knows a whole lot more than what he really does, but, or is it intentional distraction?
Right. See, I'm actually going to have to play devil's advocate on this. Is I think what it is, and when I say devil's advocate, I mean just in a way, but
right.
I think this is actually more details about the crime scene than I don't think this is any kind of distraction. I think he basically paid very, very close attention to David. Once again, I mean, I got a feeling there's something between. I mean, the way he talks about Kamel, I'm just going to play it this way, and the rest of it.
It's disgusting.
Yeah, so you've seen the rest of the text, I'm guessing.
No, I've heard snippets, and I saw something where I can't even remember. It just made me so sick what he said, and I'm like going, if I was David, I'd have punched her frickin' lights out. And Kamel, I mean, she had to sit there and listen to his vile little voice saying that crap to her.
Well, see, I haven't heard any of those conversations.
That's in the book. That's in the book.
Okay.
Okay. I'll have to go and read a little further and see if I can get those. But yeah, basically, when it comes down to how he talks to him, or talks in the text messages. This guy here, he seems very, very much like he is very, not only just interested, but he's like really into Kamel.
Yep.
And so I think there was definitely some kind of like urge for him. He needed to go and get rid of David. But at the same time, like because we can basically assume Kamel was not reciprocating this for him. So because she's not reciprocating this, I think that probably drove this narcissist here, which we know he is pretty much a textbok narcissist. Once again, this is just my opinion.
He calls himself
what he looks like.
He calls himself a narcissist.
Oh,
he does.
Brother,
yeah.
You got to be kidding me.
Nope.
This makes this so much worse for him.
He has no shame in that, but he also says that David was more of a narcissist than he was.
Yeah, I'm calling
takes one to know. I don't know.
Yeah,
well, see, my thought is, okay, now this guy reminds me a lot of a serial killer we've all probably heard of, Ted Bundy. Just saying, you got a lot of the same traits. The guy likes to interject. He likes to really, he thinks he is holier than thou. He thinks he is hottest thing out there. I mean, even when
he's got it all figured out.
I mean, you even saw even one of the texts earlier, throughout the rest of it, that he was like, yeah, I'm like the most attractive guy in the whole documentary. It's like, what? Why would you say that? What prompted this? He just wants to keep showing that he thinks he's so beautiful. He's lame. He's just so lame.
Well, yeah, and from a female. So I'm now a female. So
You're
from
a female
perspective. Okay, don't get my secret out. But I am telling you, I would be so with Kamel. It's like he is just so ew. I mean, there's no way, from my perspective anyway, that I would ever give him a second glance. And I think that was the same thing with Kamel. Kamel's a beautiful woman, and David was an attractive man. And I'm sorry, but when you compare David with Mason, David wins, hands down.
Oh, yeah. Well, David. The thing is with David, I mean, I don't really gonna get into his looks or anything, but like, if you look at just like personality-wise, you can tell right off the bat, David's not a narcissist.
Right.
He's proud, but he's also the way he spoke. If you look at the timeline, which is also in the police reports, that he spoke. He's very, very proud to be a United States combat veteran. Very, very proud of his service, but he's also not proud of what he had to do. Obviously, we can see with the conversations with Mitch Heil and all this. There's a reason he wanted out. But there's also a reason he had that brotherhood in the military. So there's a lot going on with that I thought was really fascinating, because with Mason Hendricks, you got none of that. This guy is just proud because he thinks he is holier than thou. He's like I said, he's got that kind of almost like a Ted Bundy kind of complex going on.
Well, and along those same lines, because Ted Bundy was highly educated, he was working on being an attorney before he dropped out. And it's the same thing. I mean, Mason is not a stupid man. He's very well educated. And so, I mean, yeah, he has a lot of similarities in that regard.
Yeah, that's true.
That you're pointing out.
All right, let's go here. Just want to go maybe about 15, maybe 20 more minutes or so here on this.
We'll be able to finish this real quick. All this slide does is it basically shows, okay, the inconsistencies on what Mason Hendricks is saying about the time and what Klien had stated, and also about the 911 call. It was called in on Klien. So this just shows right here, you got the police report saying 19th of January, and you got also Klien admitting to 19th of January. But then you got Mason Hendricks saying, no, we don't really know. I can't really remember the time, but it was definitely after the cleaners, like a day or two after the cleaners, that would make it 25th or 26th. Yeah, I'm not calling. So I don't believe him at all. You got two people against one on this one, with one actually having some evidence to back it up, which is the 911 call. So,
well, I mean, he says if he says he was in the house with Klien, we know Klien was in the house on the 19th, on January 19th, 2015. I put all of these guys there, January 19th, 2015. Now, I do believe that they were there later, definitely. There's no doubt that they were also there on other days, too. But it wasn't just like, they weren't there. The only time that we know of Klien being there is the 19th. When Klien is talking to the cops, that's the date that they're talking about, not any other date.
Yeah.
So Klien, I mean, if Klien is talking and he's saying all these things, I would think Klien would also mention, hey, I was also there, later in these other days. Now, obviously, it's possible Klien and these guys were there after February 18th, 2015, which I definitely know was true. That's also in the police reports. The same person is also telling me that they were there. They were cleaning the house, which is weird because the house should have been cleaned by the professional cleaners, but they were, quote-unquote, preparing the house for when Kamel's sister came. You guys have talked about the way that Hendricks was towards Kamel. There's some similarities based on my conversations with him. There's similarities with Kamel's sister. And the one thing, this was before Kamel's sister had gotten married to her then boyfriend, but I believe it was right around that time then they got married, they had a kid, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So, okay. And then, of course, he mentions Judy, too, of course. He's got to mention Judy. And I'm cool with chatting. Also, Hendricks is as ridiculous as Judy with mistellings here.
Yeah.
This is 2016 that we're talking about here.
Yeah, he was not a fan of Judy. There's other texts that I didn't bring up in this one, so I was just kind of following what you wanted to go on. But there was definitely other messages where he was just, I had highlighted that he really has like this disgust with Judy.
The reason why I thought that maybe he wasn't, that the cleaning hadn't started until January 20th, which when you look at the dates, you look at the times, that doesn't really make sense. I don't believe that the cleaners started on January 20th, but he makes it clear here, we were not in there before the cleaning team was. That's what prompted me to try to figure out, okay, when did the cleaning team first get there, which we still don't have a clear answer on. And I do hope one day we can, get a clear answer on. I just want to know, when did you guys start and when did you finish? That's it, because based on what he's saying.
I believe in the police report they do say it was the 24th.
That they finished.
Yes.
But they never say when the cleaning team started.
Yeah, I think there was illusion. I think is what I was finding. It was really early when I found this stuff in the morning. I was like, oh man, it was basically in zombie mode. But
you would have to think, if the crime happened on the 17th, the guns are taken out on January 18th, had to have started on the 18th or the 19th, I would think. I don't know. I mean, but if they're in there, if they're in there before the cleaning team, if the cleaning team doesn't get in there until the 20th and they're in there before that, that's a big problem. That's why he has to make this statement here.
Yeah.
So even if the cleaning, let's just say that the cleaning team started on January 18th, he's in there on January 19th.
Yep.
There's no reason to be in there on January 19th.
Exactly, and that's
period.
the point.
Right.
Well, especially because in another text he also talks about they were cleaning and looking for clues.
Mm-hmm.
That to me, red flags. But I do think this whole thing where he's been, basically saying we were not in there before the cleaning team, or we were in there the day or two after the cleaners. So when it comes down to that, I think that's purely distraction. He's trying to just basically cover his ass. I was not in there. Our group was not in there until after. So. Because, yes, as you stated, yes, that they were caught basically being in there while it's still an active crime scene, when they're still being looked at, then, yes, they would be in a lot of trouble for that. So. Yeah.
Anything else?
No, we can definitely move on to the next one, so that definitely covers it. All right, this is the interesting one. So this is how this all plays out, and this should open anybody's eyes about this. So you got two different opposing views here. There's a January 19th, which we know they were there, but you also got Mason Hendricks saying they were there after the 19th. So regardless, it's after the 19th. This is basically what he's claiming. So we're going to work from his text back, and you'll see what I'm talking about. He states, we were not in there before the cleaning team, and we were in there the day or two after the cleaners. Okay? So that's after the 19th. So then you got these other statements here. So we're going to go to the left over here, this bottom left. We went there, I want to say around the 23rd or something, because the smell was so bad still. Okay, well, cleaners, when they go into that kind of stuff, that's usually a smell they will try and take care of. At least there's going to be a lot of, the chem bombs. They have to talk about that, too, because let off more chem bombs to dissipate the smell. By the 23rd, once again, if they were working on, we'll say the 20th, right, or even the 18th, that house would have most likely it would have had a funny smell to it, but it would not have been of death, and it would not have been something that generally would have probably stuck to your clothes you could not get off.
Exactly.
And then he also states that this one, Chris was never there alone. So now we've got one statement that comes back to this 23rd saying, okay, maybe, but then that same statement also goes up towards this one we're going to get into next, which Chris was never there on his own. He was there with me, Danny, Dan Jr., and Adam. All of us watched Danny Mason very closely. So you guys already heard this one, and they've got the plate number. When it comes down to it, now I find this funny because, well, Dan Jr. was there. Well, we got this on the 19th. Detective Bone and McKnight had met with David Crowley and his kids, and on the 19th. Once again, we don't know the exact time, but we know they met on the 19th. So that would have been that same day. Okay, that's kind of interesting. So 45-minute drive. I don't know. I'm basically seeing this as a little interesting because, especially you look at that call, that was put in at I think it was 12:30, and I'm assuming these detectives are most likely, in my opinion, I would say they're probably still doing the 9 to 5 type of thing. It just just working this case generally. It's nothing active where they need to actually be out for an extensive amount of time necessarily, but very well could be wrong on that. But we do see that Dan Jr. is definitely in on this. He was not there alone, or Chris was not there alone, so we got our team that was there, and this confirms it with Hendricks as well. And that also goes back up to, they talk about the police. The police didn't contact until a month later or something like that, and then I got a call from David's dad saying the police had found the missing bullet up in the attic. Once again, we can basically take this right over the police report, and we've got the 911 call and everything stating 19th. So this already shoots it back to the 19th. We can already basically say Mason Hendricks lied. So once again, anybody seeing this can definitely see Mason Hendricks lied. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. He knew. He knew what time he was there. He didn't want to say it because it's something he could get in a lot of trouble for. But he did admit he was there. So this is basically where they're going to leave this here. We know that Hendricks is also another liar in this out of this group as well. So why did he lie? Why did Chris Klien Say that Dan Sr. was there when he wasn't. More questions, And once again, if they're lying about this type of thing, my assumption, my opinion, is there's got to be some guilt for something. Were they doing something wrong? But, just a kind of little tidbit to throw in there, too. This is also coming from Mason Hendricks, who also claimed that he and Sean Wright had also helped write the trilogy of the Gray State, and that basically at the end of it, no matter what, we the people lose in it. Well, we know that it's not necessarily we the people that lose in that one. In fact, if we're looking at the 2014 script, not really. Not really. So he wasn't a part of that one. He was a part of the 2015 script, and maybe, but it wasn't really we the people that lost. I mean, it was, but not entirely.
Sure. Yeah, in the 2013 script, it seems like we do all lose.
Yeah, I mean, we lose, but not entirely, because there's still some kind of hope that's kind of lingering there to some degree. I felt with that ending of that, but they could have definitely carried it over to more. But with the 2014 script, they leave it basically where that ends. That's the end of it. We know the bad guy gets taken. He's exposed. So. Yep,
he's taken out, and the Patriots have taken over, basically. Yep. So great points, man.
Yep.
Yeah, this is great. This visual sums it up, and this is where our next podcast. This is where we're going to pick up. So I'll probably need you to do the exact same thing that you did here to start off the next podcast.
Sure.
This is what the next one is going to be focused on. Is this stuff right here?
Absolutely.
Great work, William.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Any final words from anybody?
Oh, just so much. And just thank you again. I know this has a lot of work, so I really think William deserves a huge shout-out.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, if that's it then, we're going to go ahead and shut this down. The January 19, 2015 thing where Detective Bone met with Daniel Crowley at his home is very important, so I do hope to pick it up right there. There's your little cliffhanger. And until next month, God bless you all, and thank you all again for listening and watching the Gray Stage Podcast.